Welcome back, everyone. This is the second episode in 2 years. I'm so happy to be here with Yeoh, the founder of OnePointFive, a climate company. Neil, can you tell us a little bit about OnePointFive, why it's called that, and the story behind how it was started?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Treza. 1.5 is 1.5 degrees Celsius. The vision is that that's the level of warming that we need to keep under from the 1950s in order to avoid the worst of climate catastrophe. And we talked about this before. We're not quite yet at 1.5 degrees. We're at 1.1 or 1.2 degrees.
That's pretty close, though.
It is quite close. And if we don't halve emissions by 2030 and eliminate them completely by 2050.
So halve emissions in the next 8 years.
8 years, yes.
And then eliminate them completely in the next 28 years.
Basically, yes. If we can do that, then we avoid the worst of climate, meaning like more natural disasters, droughts, floods. It's quite terrible, but we are on the trajectory of like a 3 to 4 degrees temperature warming. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So I purposely chose an ambitious target, both from an optimistic standpoint, but from a North Star for people to follow, to know that this is the target we should be hitting, if not keeping under. And the way that we try to do that through 1.5 is to make it very easy to access experts, to bridge the talent gap, to both solve problems and to deploy solutions that will help keep warming below 1.5. So we're very much a people-driven business.
Okay, I'm going to ask you more detail about what exactly you do, but first, so that our listeners have some context, it sounds like, and also me, just to know the data and the science, it sounds like right now, the trend is going up, right?
Yes.
And we have to get it going down really fast.
Yes.
So how on earth are we going to do that?
Yeah,
what's the plan?
Exactly. I mean, basically there's two solutions to keeping warming below 1.5 from a mitigation standpoint, meaning basically CO2, which is one of the carbon dioxide, what we exhale, is one of the most prominent greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So basically, just from a basic science standpoint, we have these greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which includes carbon dioxide, nitrous, and like sulfur and the fluorides. They all end up in this atmosphere. The more we pump out, the thicker the blanket is. So when the sun shines down, it kind of captures more heat within this area. And basically, we have basic measures to reduce emissions, which is our mitigation solutions, which is everything from switching to renewable energy or finding ways to capture the emissions that we pump out, or even like Symbrosia here from Yeoh that, you know, feeds cows like seaweed so that the cows burp less, which gives out methane to reduce that. But in order to hit 1.5, we also need technology
Also maybe
solutions.
Eating less beef so that there are less cows
Exactly,
in the world,
that's
right?
absolutely right. Changing
Spoken
our
like
food
a true
habits.
vegan. Okay.
But no, the concept of being able to also draw down carbon, and that's where Bill Gates has been releasing his book on both nature-based solutions and technology-based solutions. So how do we draw down more carbon that naturally is drawn down so that we can really meet this target? Because without actually having those engineered solutions, which is kind of like capturing carbon dioxide using a vacuum, which is one of the solutions actually on the ground level, to vacuum CO2 and use a chemical or solvent process to store it underground, or actually like accelerate the mineralization of minerals to actually capture carbon dioxide, or just planting more trees and having more soil, we won't actually get to our target. So there's a lot of need for these solutions that will draw down carbon.
Okay, so it sounds like right now greenhouse gas emissions have been increasing over time, and we need to shift that so that they start decreasing really fast so that we can have our emissions.
100%.
Okay, so it sounds like an emergency situation where a lot of innovation and technology are needed, and government policy, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yes.
And it sounds like you focus on the innovation and technology aspect.
Yes.
So tell us more, what does your company do? It sounds like it's not just a consulting company.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just a consulting company. So what we've noticed in climate is, in anything, you need people, right? And if you don't have the right talent at the right time and for the right purposes, then how do you actually solve that problem? So you talk about policy, but I also talk about it from a science standpoint, a technology standpoint, a business standpoint. So the way that we access any kind of expertise is kind of broken in the climate field. If you think about traditional management consulting, you generally hire generalists to full-time staff. And as soon as you do that, you're incentivized to increase their utilization rate, meaning as much as they're charging out money to a client, it justifies them being a full-time staff. That may work for business situations, but it doesn't really work for climate. Like the idea of having a generalist come solve a very bespoke issue within like food and agriculture just doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's the model that we've always used. So for us, when COVID happened and I launched OnePointFive, I saw this shift in how the future of work was occurring, that norms became that we could use Zoom, that people were more open to using digital tools, and that people were able to try to do their work online. And so we thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we use this trend of the future of work going remote to actually increase the access of the right expert at the right time? So therefore, we don't need to hire people in full time, but then we can access that scientist at MIT that does the carbon removal, or we can access that scientist that does that food and ag in London, but bring them together on a particular need and actually execute that project much cheaper, faster, and actually achieve better climate impact.
Okay, so I'm a business that's trying to reduce my emissions, and I don't have in-house expertise to help me figure out how to do that, so then I hire you.
Exactly, and so we, just as any startup, you don't know what business model is actually going to work, what the product market fit is. Like you think about it as you have an embryo, and how do you even like dress that embryo as it grows into a baby or a teenager? And so for us, we had two hypotheses. Like one, either we stay this consultancy of which we just use technology and we try to do that route and just become a climate advisory, or we become a full-fledged marketplace where we have a supply of experts and people can come onto a platform and then find the right expert for their job. Right now, what we're seeing is that we're actually a hybrid of the two. And it's not because we're trying to be the best of both worlds, it's because the current market for climate is nascent. It's like a rising wave, and people still need to be handheld. And in some senses, an hour call with someone from an expert isn't going to solve your challenges. And so we're realizing that we need to come in with a bespoke
Not everyone
team.
can hire Al Gore. Yeah.
Exactly.
I hear you. This is a fact.
So we have basically a lot of reform consultants that can project manage. They know people. They have their specialty areas, and then we supplement that with experts to work on teams of 2 or 3 with our clients in more of a subscription retainer model. Which just makes it much more like cost effective and effective for the clients that we work for.
Okay. And one of the things I've noticed is that you're hiring a lot of people right out of university, right? And you came to Yale to do your mid-career master's in environmental management,
That's
correct? And now you've hired a lot of people from the environment school and the management school and others. And your stories about the people that come to work for you and with you are really underscoring the message that young people these days are so insistent on being part of climate change solutions and really want to dedicate their lives to it. Can you tell me a little bit more about how your company has been experiencing that?
Yeah, that's a
Was that always your plan, like part of your assumptions?
Yeah.
Or was it like a pleasant surprise?
I mean, we're definitely right place, right time, where COVID crisis, I think, changed people's perspective. It was a paradigm shift that, oh gosh, I need to care about stuff. And even though COVID is, yes, related somewhat with climate, it's not really directly related. We did kind of see that come through. But for me personally, knowing all the social entrepreneurs I used to work with at Echoing Green, like team is everything. Especially in the early stages.
Right, because you were working at Echoing Green,
yes,
which is one of the organizations that supports social entrepreneurs around the world, right? And you were helping to screen and support the fellows, the social entrepreneurs that Echoing Green supports. So now you're in their shoes.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, it's also the reason why I set up OnePointFive, which I think a lot of times social entrepreneurs, I would never encourage people to like just be an entrepreneur for the sake of it. I think we talked about this, but it's when you are like the founder market fit where there's a particular problem that you personally see and that you see uniquely you have the opportunity to solve for. I actually saw that at Echoing Green. So tying it to team, it's basically all these entrepreneurs that we're funding in climate solutions. So we had 71 companies in 20 countries across everything from like bacteria eating waste. At
Echoing Green?
Yes, at Echoing Green. Desert housing in Egypt, green housing in Thailand. It wasn't just about the grants that were stopping them from really bringing their solutions to market. It was a lot about finding the right people at the right time, setting up the pilot contracts with industry, a lot of things that are the capacity building, the bridge of their solutions to actual business outcomes. And so ironically, that's what OnePointFive became.
And it is the team that matters. You know, we always
100%.
tell our students, like, ideas are a dime a dozen, but what people are looking for is, are you the right team that's actually going to implement this idea?
Precisely. And I think sometimes what shocked me though at the beginning was, as a founder, you need to find those team members at the same time, and that can be really tricky, especially as like a bootstrapped customer funded model that we were. We didn't have venture-backed funding to like hire straight out of the gate, and so it forced us to think about hiring in a very different way. The benefit, obviously, as you sort of said, as an impact, a social enterprise, I think we do have an advantage that we have a purpose of why we work, but it's not enough as well, right? You need to also pay people. People need to be able to feed themselves. So it's finding that right balance of finding top quality people, but also do something that's really impactful.
So how are you doing that? Can you share some examples of the people that joined your team and how?
Yeah, and the caveat I'll say with this is that you know, when I started 1.5, it wasn't to try to become famous or to build like a great organization. For me, what brings me to life is people. So I personally just love people. And when I think less about the revenue and the growth and think about building a climate movement of action makers, whether in 1.5 or beyond, that's what brings me to life. And I think
a climate movement of action makers.
Yeah,
it sounds like that's your goal. That's your driving force in life, building
a
climate movement of action makers.
Well, 100%. Like if we have more people that can work on climate today, we'll get to the solution. And if 1.5 is just like
if you're like activating each human to be part of the solution and not just be really upset and stressed out by this problem.
Exactly. And so I think
that's the social entrepreneur in you.
Exactly. And there's this like part in Shoe Dog, I think the Nike founder, I bring it up because he struggled to sell encyclopedias, but when he was selling the shoes, he just came to life. And I think when you're a social entrepreneur and you so believe in what you're building, I think that infectiousness kind of like rolls off into the early team members that I had. Like honestly, the first hires that I had, I literally had 1.5. It could have been written on a napkin. And you know, you have to sell the cart before the horse, but there was this real sense of like a depth in what I was trying to build. And I wanted to bring people along that I think was infectious for people to like say, oh, I want to be a part of that because I also think that way. And then all the other things kind of came on. It's like, how can we make this work? What would make it work for you? And knowing what they wanted out of it as well. So you have to almost become like a servant leader in that sense of listening to their needs first and not just throwing money at it if we were venture backed. And so it meant definitely that, you know, we were paying our staff as much as we could at the time, but we were super transparent with what was coming in, what was going out. It wasn't as if there was a hierarchy. I think there's a book called Brave New Work, which we follow, which is about democratized decision making, that anyone can make a decision as long as it's above the waterline, meaning that, you know, our roles and titles are there for a reason, but you can challenge me if you're an analyst, or if you think that we should be doing something, we should be doing it. So when you co-build, and I think we use this in consulting, when you co-build something, you feel ownership of it, you feel autonomy of it, and it's more sticky. And I think everyone has had a fingerprint on 1.5. We've had over 30 people work with us in the last 1.5 to 2 years. And I can tell you of all the little fingerprints that were placed there, of which maybe we couldn't pay them market price for the work that they did, but there was fulfillment and belief in the vision that we wanted, and they almost invested themselves into the business.
I do think co-building is a huge pattern in social entrepreneurship, and in the sense that even if you have the perfect solution, if others don't feel like they were part of the process, you can't be in a rush to implement it because it won't stick.
Yes.
And even if your solution is slightly less than perfect, which most solutions are, if people feel like they were part of building it, then they'll want to be part of seeing it succeed.
100%, and that's one of the biggest challenges I find. You know, Echoing Green, I work with so many, like close to 100 different social entrepreneurs, and you can feel very prideful about your startup, you know, and feel like I should be making the decisions. And yes, at the end of the day, I think there is a role for a founder who knows best at the end of the day, but it can't come at the detriment of either micromanagement or like dictatorship, because especially when we're dealing with both impact and entrepreneurship, the impact needs to be there in balance, and that's also how you treat the people and the team members around you. And case in point, we've had people stay with us for the whole 2 years and have still recommended other people to come join us even if they couldn't work with us. So we've had amazing retained staffing, but also a lot of our current staff are referrals from other team members. So if you create that right environment for them that's like values first, principle aligned, they will choose to work with you.
Because you told me a couple of examples where people turned down really tempting job offers to come work with you.
Yeah, so one of our team members, declined a job with Uber for growth strategy straight out of business school, could have earned definitely double the amount, but had been working on part-time projects with me and just asked me one day, what would it look like if I worked here? Because I really believe we're building something great.
I think you said Uber Japan had offered him a job, right? And he refused it.
Yeah, it was a big one. And another colleague of ours who received double salary to stay at her job in EY. But
so she was at Ernst & Young?
Yes, as a top leading manager in their management consulting financial practice. And we talked to her boss as a referral, and he said if I could pay her anything to bring her back, I would.
Wow.
But she refuses because...
And they offered to double their salary.
Double the salary, yeah. And, we couldn't obviously match that by far at all. But she came because there is this movement of people who want to work. But I will say that the responsibility for the social enterprise is it needs to be values aligned. There was a project that we really could have done with to get revenue at one point in time. It was a seaweed company that was trying to mine seaweed in Scotland. But their concept was there's only 1% of the seaweed we're mining, and we're creating jobs, because seaweed can be created into like other products and things like that. We looked into the due diligence and we decided that this was not impactful and that by working on this, we would be greenwashing.
I see.
And even though we really needed the money, I said no. And I didn't think it was a big deal because for me, principles first is the reason why I started this business. But it resonates as a story with my team that's the reason why they chose to stay.
I noticed this with the last episode with Danny Eagle, that, and this is coming up a lot about social entrepreneurship. It's not just your product or service that you're offering that is changing the world, but also the way you do it is that you're not really thinking about your team, for example, as inputs to create the outcomes that you desire, but like they are the outcomes, that you're building capacity, you're building a workforce. In your case, it seems like you're almost as passionate, if not more passionate, about building this, what did you call it? This
climate movement of action
makers. Movement of action makers, just as much as the actual technical solutions 100%. You're providing to your clients.
Exactly, no, and I think you really resonate. It's about the people at the end of the day, because if we can mobilize more people, we're actually achieving the mission.
Well, that's an even bigger theory of change. We talk about theory of change in social entrepreneurship, and one theory of change for 1.5 could be we help businesses and companies create and implement climate change solutions. But your theory of change is almost, it sounds like, that could be part of it, but also we help young people who want to change the world become part of the climate action movement.
Yeah.
Like could be even more impactful.
Actually, that's a really good point. I think I should take that on. Yeah, that is actually the essence of what actually brings me to life.
I brought this book with me by my colleague Zoe Chance, Influences Your Superpower, because she's donating half her proceeds to climate change to fight the climate crisis. So definitely for all our listeners, buy this book, Influences Your Superpower. Cool. And but also because she told me that she always worked in marketing and influence and persuasion, but not necessarily to a certain subject matter. She was kind of like sector agnostic, right? She wanted to help everyday people activate their superpower of influencing others for good. But the reason she decided that her own personal mission is going to be applying that to climate change was that her students influenced her. And they were so passionate about climate change, and they eventually brought her on board as one of those climate action movement people that you're describing. And so I thought about her book when I was chatting with you and listening to your company, and it sounds like everyone not everyone, unfortunately, many people in the world are upset about climate change.
Yes.
And many of them don't feel that they're part of the solution beyond like whatever they can do within their own household or workplace. And it sounds like there are many pathways that people can become activated to dedicating their careers 100%. To working in climate, or even if they work in a company that's not a climate company, but could find ways to reduce their footprint and help curb emissions. Like everyone can find a way to help reach that target that you described, right?
Precisely.
Through their work and their home.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about what else is needed, because I think the technology and innovation is one part, And one thing that we always talk about in social entrepreneurship is like it's one pathway to change, but most of the problems social entrepreneurs are trying to solve like can't be solved through social entrepreneurship alone. So climate change, okay, technology and innovation is one part, but at the end of the day, don't we also just need governments to regulate and force people to curb their emissions?
Yeah.
So are you engaging with that in any way? You know, like some social entrepreneurs see their company as a platform to advocate, or they partner with those who are not implementers and innovators, but who are, for example, just advocating and things like that. So well, I won't put you on the spot by asking you how are you engaging with policy, but I'll start by asking to what degree do you think technology and innovation will solve this?
Yeah.
And then to what else do you think is needed and how do the two fit together?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think policy is absolutely important, and we work both policy and we're trying to interject the justice piece through some work at Yeoh as well. And we're hoping to integrate that because you're absolutely right. Like it's a mix of all of the above. And unfortunately or fortunately, governments have made climate change a partisan thing. And it's, I don't know, understand, like, Don't Look Up, the movie, I think, kind of captures it, which is...
I haven't checked it out.
You haven't watched that out?
It's
the basic premise that, you know, people will try to fact check things, but they're really actually true. And so climate is actually a thing, but it's so surprising how it can be sort of mystified and chosen not to be true. So the one thing that has happened, at least here in the US, is that, you know, Democrats, Republicans, I think they argue a lot about climate change. And so independent parties like the SEC or the Securities Exchange Commission have to sort of step in to make decisions on what are we going to do about climate because of the issues with different parties sort of arguing about it. And so
that's the federal agency that kind of regulates...
a lot of the finance sectors, but you can imagine that one area that has come up a lot is climate risk. So the basic premise is that climate change is already happening. You know, we're seeing natural disasters all across the world right now, things that are disrupting business as usual. So executives are coming to life now, realizing that if we're not checking out what our climate risk is on our business, we're going to go out of business. And so in Europe right now, which is much more progressive, they have a mandate that if your company is a certain size, you have to actually disclose the climate risk, both on the physical side, so your physical assets, but also on the transition side, your strategy to like adopt different scenarios that are going to happen. But the US hasn't had that. And so they're only just starting to do that. Actually, in the next couple of months, they're going to come out with a recommendation. And we were able to get into the door to speak with the SEC and the team almost three times now.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And I think the reason why is because when policymakers are trying to make policy, the US is so governed by capitalism and industry that if you're just talking to industry, they'll say, no, of course we can't. You know, not necessarily, but, you know, they'll be like, not necessarily saying, oh, we can do that or we should do that. But when you're talking about the solutionists, the innovation and the entrepreneurs on the ground, and we're able to basically bridge the entrepreneurs that are building the solutions straight with the government, that conversation is very different. It's like literally like, if we were to tell industry to do this, would it be possible? And we literally can have a really real conversation. And so that's where we found our role, is to bridge directly from the solutions to policy so that the policies that are made are much more true to what's possible. But it's unfortunate. I think policy is just as other areas are very solid. And so that's where I think 1.5 can bridge the gap amongst the science, business, technology.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that actually your theory of change is unified. It's not that you don't work in tech and innovation. Some of your work does that, but actually you work in people. And it's one unified theory of change that everybody needs access to talent and to scientists and experts to have reductions in the next 8 years. And then sometimes that's through technology and innovation for businesses, and other times it's to work with governments in creating and implementing policies.
Exactly.
So it is one unified theory of change. It's about people.
Yeah, and that's a trick for us, was the breadth and depth. At the end of the day, you know, we're a people's business, and you know, people would tell you it's very difficult to scale a people type business.
Yeah.
But I think combined with technology and the new future of work, we've been able to do it. We've been growing 4x, and you know, the 27 projects we've worked with 15 customers didn't come out of the blue. But in order to keep ourselves focused, we've had to figure out that structure of our offerings, just like anyone needs to figure out their business model. So we really kind of talk about services, tech, and finance, and then this enabling ecosystem building or capacity building layer, which includes policy. It includes like curriculum building, workshops, white papers, thought leadership. And so we're hoping that that is like broad and deep enough to really have a tangible impact. And we find that a lot of our projects basically touch on multiple parts. And that's the whole idea of climate and business, is that everything's interconnected. And systems change. As you talked about theory of change, the concept of theory of change is that, you know, by doing a particular action, you're changing the system and you're hitting the root cause.
Right.
And if we can't do that with climate or with the way that we deploy people into projects that sound really complex, we're not able to create the change that we should have.
I'll end by asking you about the justice piece, because you mentioned very briefly that you're bringing in the justice piece. What do you mean by that? Isn't climate change justice for any living creature? Because we can continue to exist and live in this world.
This is such an interesting space. I mean, there's a great resource called the Global Safety Net that came out from Project Drawdown. It shows basically that a huge proportion of the lands that we need to save or conserve to draw down carbon, like our natural resources, actually owned by Indigenous people, but we don't actually have them in the room in the conversation. Case in point, I was actually part of Brookings Institute's SDGs for room number 12 for COP26.
Okay.
And within that, we're talking about nature-based solutions and what we need to do from a policy, technology, and finance side. Unfortunately, we really didn't have representation. We had the head of nature-based solutions from the World Economic Forum, from the World Bank, but we didn't have hardly any people who were Indigenous leaders of their own lands, which is what we need. And so, you know, we were thinking about bringing climate justice as a fourth lens, but it actually dawned on us. It was literally 2 days ago on the train. I was talking to Matthias, my founding partner, and we said, no, justice should be integrated into everything that we do. And so, in fact, you know, there's something interesting when social entrepreneurs try to introduce something new. Justice has so much like trigger to it. Justice, you know, sounds like, you know, advocate, like I'm with a sign, I'm like protesting. It doesn't really have necessarily the best positive connotations or proactive connotations to it. So, but we can actually integrate it. It's about like, what does it mean if we're building a climate technology solution and helping that kind of scale? What's the justice lens within that? Like, who are the people who may be impacted or who we could serve, either from different disparate parts in community or be able to help the Indigenous people who are managing their own lands. And so we've actually come to the conclusion that justice should be a part of everything that we do. We might not call it justice to like ease our customers into it, but we're going to add a diversity, equity, inclusion lens into every project that we do and add it as a recommendation.
Yeah, if climate change affects everyone, then everyone needs to be part
100%.
of the solution. And that goes back to what we mentioned in the last episode, nothing about us without us.
Yes.
So for those of you who missed the last episode, it was about ideas, diversity, equity, access, and social justice. Ideas Generation with Danny Eagles, so check it out. The next episode is about Havenly, a refugee-led social enterprise right here in New Haven. And I'm just feeling very, very lucky to be able to be back here in this recording studio and to be talking to these amazing social entrepreneurs. Thank you so much, Neil, for taking the time to talk to my students and to me and to our audience. And hopefully, you know, each social entrepreneur in their own way is activating people in a different way. And I think that hopefully with everyone combined, we'll be able to meet these grave challenges and deadlines that we have.
Precisely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.